I feel that I've chanced upon something fundamental to my enjoyment of stories in regards to characters, and that is about powerless characters, which is something that I truly want to avoid. I want all the characters that I introduce to have a freedom of choice. What they do with it and the consequences they will face potentially for their actions is a different topic, but really, I don't want to read, thus, I don't want to write about characters that are simply forced to do whatever the story dictates for it to progress. I don't want to write about some sort of an illusion of choice. Instead, I want to create characters that make the decisions and then bear the burden of whatever that brings in the future. It is very nuanced, something again that will require a lot of work on my part, and most probably I will never truly get it right as I would like to, because ultimately, no matter how I try to give the characters their sort of autonomy, in the end, it's still me who writes the story. I just have to make sure that the characters have multiple choices to pick from and that it was their conscious decision to perform whatever action happens in the story and has whatever consequences results in any sort of reaction from the world around them. I did mention this in the protagonist section, and the reason why I'm bringing this up again under the banner of side characters is that for me, with all my talk about protagonists whom I want to rebel against the story, against me, it should be somewhat obvious that they should have this freedom, but for side characters it might not be, because at the end of the day, the protagonist matters more to me in terms of my enjoyment of the story, but as it turns out, even if they are side characters, I still don't want them to end up being just some puppets of mine who only exist, only act in accordance with the plot that would make me lose interest rather quickly. I am not trying to say that every single character within my story will end up being this complex creature with a full story of his or her own. I simply lack the capacity to achieve that, but characters appearing within the story in a specific fashion just because their background, upbringing, family, specific physiology demanded it without their input. As long as I can avoid doing that, I will try to do so because it doesn't make me feel anything positive, and that's all my writing is about, to make me feel strictly good, even if these inevitables, even though they might not directly affect the protagonist, they might serve as sort of a motivation for the protagonist to act. I still don't want to use that. I don't want to put even the side characters through something like that. I am more than willing to let them feel the real results of their own choices with their own skin, but it needs to be predated by some sort of conscious selection. And that's all I'm going to say, at least for today, about this. And I'm going to move on to the Rapid Arrows and their adventure in the Den of Evil, that is the lair of the Brotherhood of the Cat's Paw, whose subterfuge they managed to unearth before it managed to bite them. And now, just moments before the news dies around them, leaving them at the mercy of their enemies, they drop the act and catch the Brotherhood red-handed. Mirek threatens the now rather pale boys with police as retaliation for their attempt at poisoning the rapid arrows, which would be fitting considering the situation. Instead, though, the Brotherhood is set into line and a disciplinary action is going to proceed, starting with Bohosh, who is quick to turn on the rest of the Brotherhood, proclaiming his innocence, that he was forced and everything was planned by the other two, but that does nothing to mollify the rapid arrows, and thus his punishment is decided to be a proper bath, since he's always seen with his hood on. So once his perpetual protection from cleanliness is down, he is taken to a pump, hauled in place on all sides, and thoroughly washed up, all that while screaming that this transgression against this right to remain greasy and disgusting is going to be tattled. After that is Bristle's turn, and the famous Rat Lord has to dispose of all his sewer pets, crying and screaming that there is no way he'll ever survive their moving on, and that he will just depart with them, which prompts Speedy to bid him farewell on his way to the Red's Heaven. And the last but not the least is Longpole, and his begging for mercy and lenient punishment is only met with scorn. So they lead him to an old lady who is there outside dusting the rugs and carpets, and Longpole's task is going to be to help her do it instead. This truly Herculean quest leaves his arms on the verge of falling off, while his bitter enemies cheer him on the sidelines, telling him to put more pressure into the hits, lean further into them. When it's all done, sweat is running down his face and neck and all, while the woman happily thanks him for helping her with such vigor. And when the rapid arrows are finally leaving the Brotherhood alone, Speedy adds one last spiteful icing on the cake in the form of a heartfelt farewell, wishing for another invitation when the Brotherhood is cooking the next time. And next we see Speedy, for once, paying attention at school when the teacher is talking about Christmas, that there are supposed to be these holidays of good and peace, and that everyone should strive to perform at least some sort of a good deed. So when it's time for a club meeting, he gives his own interpretation of such speech, that Christmas are the time of the Christmas twist, confections, sweets, raisins, but actually gets to the proper point and good deeds. So he proposes that the club does some kind of an act of kindness, which gives Mirek an idea what they could do. They will need some tools for carving and woodwork, then some wood, paints, and wheels. Everyone will pick one of these to bring, sharing the burden between the five boys. Some of them go around stores asking for unused boxes, which they would be able to then extract planks from. Speedy manages to procure some tins of old paint from a shop, even get an advice how to deal with stale paint using turpentine. He is so thankful, and when referring to the solvent, he messes up the spelling, as is a running joke, calling it a perpentine instead, saying that he's got that at home. On their way back, Redcap and Yindra have this whole wagon full of boxes, and they are met by Yarka, who, unable to find a source of little wheels, instead settled for an alternative in the form of a many spools used for threads. Meanwhile, Mirek prepared all the tools they'll need and then proceeded to craft a prototype of this horse-drawn carriage for children, painted in happy colors. Speedy takes it upon himself to do the dyeing, that being his favorite activity. The number of the small carriages keeps steadily growing, and when it's finally time, they bring them all to a nearby orphanage that is asking people to donate some gifts for the children inside, which is exactly what the Rapidaros are doing. And then they all gather around a Christmas tree, the children, their caretakers, and all the members of the club. They sing Christmas carols, and Redcap whispers Mirag that seeing all that actually makes him happier than if he received the gifts himself. And this is the end of today's video. Some big revelations for me, and next time more Epidaros, more storytelling talk.